Welcome to the Egg Whisperer Show, a program exclusively designed to promote reproductive health awareness and discuss fertility preservation options. Here is your host, the Harvard-educated fertility specialist, Dr. Amy.
She's known as the Egg Whisperer.
Fertility expert Dr. Amy Abazadeh.
And you have yet another success story
Just launched by an East Bay fertility doctor.
Hi everyone. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Egg Whisperer Show. I have Dr. Allen on tonight. Hi, Dr. Allen.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for joining us yet again. I love having you on the show because I feel like we have such a great, rapport and a great back and forth about topics that are really, really important to our patients. So thanks again for joining us all the way from Georgia. I hope you had a good week last week.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Of course. So tonight's topic of conversation was actually a show topic on a 60 Minutes in Australia on Sunday night. It just happened to be, but you and I had planned this months in advance, so I thought it was interesting. And it was all about embryo donation and some really, really scary stories and some really, really good stories. So the topic of tonight's conversation is the psychological or emotional aspects of embryo donation. And with over 6 million babies born so far from IVF, you can imagine that there are so many embryos just sitting in the frozen state. And we know that these embryos, I don't consider them babies. I consider them very precious cells. And these cells have the potential to turn into a pregnancy. And so there are some people that actually want to give those cells a chance at life. And that's what we called the donating family. And then we have the other side, and they're called the recipient family. We're very careful about calling embryo donation adoption for a lot of reasons. Dr. Allen, why don't we use adoption as a term?
It's a great question, and depending on who you talk to, you will find some people do prefer to use the term adoption. Other people prefer to use the term donation or recipiency. I always use recipiency. Some of my patients choose to use adoption, and you'll see both in the literature, both out there in Google searches, etc. So there's the personhood status, right, of where does that start? And at this point, the embryo is considered still property, and you're not donating a baby itself, right? So that's a little bit of the difference, and that terminology from I think a legal standpoint, I think would be the closest thing I could state.
Right. So in the story that was in the 60 Minutes in Australia, what they basically shared was this experience of a family who their embryos were only to be stored for 10 years. So what they said is they got a letter from the clinic that said you're at your 10-week mark. You need to basically discard or donate, and they felt like they were forced into this donation situation. Clearly, if you watch the show, it doesn't sound like that they had enough informed consent when doing it. They were then told that a pregnancy resulted in a miscarriage, but in fact, that pregnancy resulted in a live birth. So, I can tell you that when a family comes to me, they always come to me to donate their embryos. I don't go sending people letters saying it's time for you to donate your embryos. People have thought about it. They want to give that gift of life to another family, right? So have you ever had a situation like that? I mean, have you ever heard of such a thing or seen clients or patients that have described something like that where they were forced to donate an embryo?
I have not. I hope my internet will come back shortly. But the donating families tend to really want to do this, and the recipients that I have worked with are very disclosing and very connected with the families that are donating, if they all are known to each other. So I have not seen any negatives with any of the donating or receiving situations that I've worked with. It's a beautiful option. So this surprised me to learn this about that news story.
Right. I mean, certainly they also shared really great stories of embryo donation, so that was really nice for me to see that it was quite balanced. But I think it's important for families, especially in the U.S., to know that there's actually a very nice system in place so that we can protect both sides, both the donating family and the recipient family, so that everyone has the right set of expectations. And one of the things that we do together, is I have patients see a fertility psychologist, to talk through people's questions and answer them before they make a very, very serious decision, before they get to the next stage, which is the legal contract. So what are some of the most common concerns that a donating family sometimes has? What kind of things do they bring up with you?
Sometimes the donating family wonders, how will the children, be in the future? If I donate my embryos, is it going to be a family that will take care of any future children? And they want to know that the children are going to be that in the future, if there are children born through these embryos, that they'll be taken care of. So, but they really don't want any involvement with decision making. They don't necessarily even require that the recipient family stay in touch. They just want to know that they're doing a good thing by their embryos, giving them a chance,
right?
And that they're going to a stable setting,
right?
Essentially,
right. Yeah, I mean that makes sense. You want to make sure that the family can raise your child and not your child. You know what I mean?
Right.
Once the embryo is donated, raise their child in the healthiest and best way possible, right? I mean, of course, that's what anyone who's donating an embryo would want for that embryo. And then what about the recipient family? What kind of concerns or things have they brought up with you about what worries or concerns them before they actually are receiving an embryo?
Recipients sometimes come into the process already well informed by their doctor, especially your patients. They want to know, I think, certainly mental health history, medical history, if they can, of the embryo genetic history. They want to know the type of involvement donors are going to want to have, if any. You'll find recipients that do want to share with their future children that they did come through with the help of embryo donation. There's still a few families who really don't plan to disclose. And that we can talk about that in just a minute, but I feel like if everybody's on the same page, donors and recipients, then, that's totally up to them. But really just the concerns are, will the child feel like mine? Will the child feel upset in any way that we went this path? But children do seem to do extremely well with this option. And there are ways to share with children certainly about the process that make it easier to learn about. But yeah, so parents come into this with concerns, just like any new parents who are really wanting a child come into the process with concerns about other things as well. So this just happens to be.
For sure. So I mean, I think the first step, like for me as a fertility doctor, the first step for a patient who's looking to donate their embryos would be to meet with someone like you, right? If they have any questions about what embryo donation means, what kind of emotional impact it might have on even their own family. Some families sometimes worry, like, if I don't disclose to the child that I already have that I donated the embryo, will that somehow harm the child? And so it's actually a really cool thing for me to see how all these families, because I've been doing embryo donation for so long, how they know each other, how they get together on occasion, how they're almost like an extended family in a way. They consider themselves part of this universe, and I see them all just making this world a better place because they're obviously, whatever they're doing is out of extreme love, right? And there's...
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
On both sides.
Yeah, so step one is meeting someone like you, and then the other thing is I strongly encourage an open relationship. And open can mean a number of things. So can you just go through the different scenarios of what open can mean and how you define the different levels of openness?
Sure. So there is openness if they are matched through a clinic. Say, for example, if you match patients who are donating and recipient patients who want to use embryos. So they're matched. They have a conversation or they see each other's profiles, and then I will meet with them individually, the two entities, and then typically hold a group meeting. Then there are levels of anonymous but can be open to being contacted when the child is of adult age. Mm-hmm. So that's sort of on the one end of the spectrum. And then there are other people who find each other, say, for example, on Facebook sites or through other internet sites, and they pair up on their own, and they get to know each other ahead of time. And then they come to a clinic and say, hey, I need to ship my embryos, or I'm going to, or we're going to go to your clinic where the embryos are and have a transfer, and they know each other well. So again, I always do recommend the individual meetings and then the group meeting to sort of bring everyone together, be sure everybody's on the same page about disclosure issues to children, future children, all of that. So there is a range, just like there is with egg donation and sperm donation, essentially.
And the donating family, do they ever ask you, like, how do we tell our own children that we donated an embryo?
Sure.
Yeah.
And
what do you recommend?
So since this is a newly much more popular option, right? It's been around as an option for a long time, but recently people have really picked up steam on learning about embryo donation and recipiency, and that it's an option for them. And so now I am getting a lot of questions from the parents of current children who have extra embryos and want to donate those. What do we tell our current children about these embryos? And so I think as long as if the relationship is going to be open or even semi-open between recipients and donors, they all should be, in my opinion, I don't like the word should, but they hopefully will be on the same page about their desires of talking to children or future children about the process. Because if the recipient family wants to tell their child or children in the future that they came through the help of donation, but the donor family says, no, I don't ever want to tell my children, and we don't, even if you contact us, we still don't want to tell our children, that creates an imbalance and a little bit of potential awkwardness for the future children on the other side. So yeah, the openness is wonderful. I just like to see everybody on the same page. And telling them can be super simple. Again, going back to keeping it very simple. Start, if the kids are older, when the people are donating their embryos, you can just say, look, we're helping another family. It's a beautiful gift, and we'll have the opportunity to get to know this family in the future.
That's a nice way of putting it. And then what about the legal aspects? I know the answer to this, but after patients come through, your part on the checklist, so to speak, they have to then meet with an attorney and draft legal language around the donation of embryos. I mean, we've seen some stories in the news about how sometimes things like that can go wrong, where a family donated the embryos and then they said, "Oh, you have 2 left. I want them back." I mean, that's tricky. So are those kinds of things that you tease out even before people get into the legal phase? Like, what happens if you donate 2 and then they don't use 1? What are you going to do, or how are you going to feel?
Absolutely. So that is something that does come up. And I always ask donor families, are there any parameters that you're drawing around this donation, any boundaries or must-haves for the contract? For example, if you donate 4 embryos and they choose not to use them all, are you asking for the embryos back, or are you giving them free and clear for that family to make that decision from here on? You can get varied answers, but most people are giving their embryos, but they do want to know eventually if there is a pregnancy created or not. Again, that all has to be okay with the recipient family as well. So yes, we do have those conversations. I've even seen where the donor family will ask that the recipient family, if something happens to them, that it be put in a will, that if the child or children need a home, say a family member can't take them, that they would like to have first right of refusal to take that child or children in the future, to be able to continue to be able to provide for that person's, for the family's child, which, again, you don't think about these options at this point, but they can get pretty creative with what they want to put in their legal contracts.
Absolutely. And I've had families that have even said things like, we want the cord blood saved for our family if they don't, or let's pay for it together. So, there are a lot of different ways of being creative when it comes to embryo donation. We talked about what the recipient family would tell their children. What about, the donating family. What about the recipient family as that child's growing up? What kind of language can you teach us that could help us talk to a child that's born from embryo donation?
Sure, and this again goes back to adoption literature followed all through the years, which is what we have looked at for talking to children of donor eggs, born with the help of donor eggs, donor sperm, surrogacy, and embryo recipiency, and sometimes combination of surrogacy and embryo recipiency. So it's always better in the professional opinion, to start when the child is very young and give them little bits and pieces of their story as they grow. So it turns into more of an organic flow of information sharing. So there's never that big formal conversation that has to happen at 12 or 15 when nobody wants to be talking about reproduction with their with their parents, and they just want to run away from the conversation. And the parents are nervous too, parents. So you get away from having to have that big formal conversation. And if you just start with something so simple, such as mommy or daddy, or mommy and daddy, or mommy, daddy, and daddy. We all wanted you so much before you came into this world, and we were trying so hard to have a baby, and we ended up going to this very special doctor, or these wonderful doctors who help put you in my tummy or uterus. Very simple, very, very simple. And then you bring in the idea of the special gift. Some years later. Again, just because you don't want to overwhelm a young child with too much information, you could say something like, we know how much we wanted you before you came into the world and didn't have everything working just right. We needed to work, and so we received this very special gift, and then we all worked together to put you in mommy's tummy or uterus. And if the child's very precocious and want to know what the gift or gifts were, or you can either choose to use the words egg and sperm, or you can say embryo, but you can say something like, it takes several pieces to make a baby, much like it takes several ingredients to make this beautiful cake, or several seeds to make this beautiful garden. It takes several pieces to make a beautiful baby, and we needed the gift of an embryo, and that is how you came into the world, and it's the most special gift we ever could have received. And so it's just keeping it very simple, and by the time they do learn the biology behind all of this, they get it. They know they were loved and they were intentional.
I want to record the last 2 minutes that you just spoke and play it on a loop over and over in my office, because that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And there are also books that also you can read to your children. Can you mention some of those for us today?
Yes. So there are several. So there's Hope and Will Have a Baby. I'll just mention that one because that is from someone, a colleague here in Atlanta. There's a wonderful series. I think you listed several books under this on the Facebook page, but there are actually so many, and more are being written. I feel like every month there's somebody trying to work on a new children's book for embryo donation, or any of these types of third-party reproduction options, and they're just precious, and they're usually for 3 to 4 to 5 years old, and they're just they keep it, again, it just goes back to the adage, keep it simple, and just start very, very small, and just fold in the bits and pieces of information. So lots of books. People can contact me if they want a comprehensive list. I'm happy to pull one together for anyone who needs it, for different families, and I'm always looking for more books. So
awesome. So if you know of a book that we didn't list, we want to hear about it. So post it in our comment section so we can be sure to have other people learn from that as a resource for them. That's a really good idea too. And I'll add your email later for folks who want to email you directly. We also posted your link for people who want to reach out to you and speak with you personally. Great. So if you're interested in being a recipient, like, where do you start? How do you know what I mean, I know there's Google and you can just Google it, and we posted a number of links. But in your experience, where do patients start when they're looking for embryos?
So there are numerous ways to connect with donors, and people get creative with this. And again, I think Facebook has been really one of the biggest resources for families wanting to connect. So there are pages for donor families and recipient families to connect. Say, for example, on Facebook, there are also embryo, and again, the terms are going to be very embryo adoption centers, embryo donation centers. So there's a center in Knoxville, the National Embryo Donation Center, Adoption Center. I always confuse the two. But and then you have Dr. Sweet's program in Florida. You have in-house clinic programs, for example, when you match your patients with recipients, which I think is always a beautiful option. They always come so informed. And then there are, there's snowflakes. There's several different sites or storage centers that have been around for a while. And you have some that are really meant specifically for couples who are heterosexual, traditional couples who've been married for a certain number of years, et cetera. And then you have others that are just open to any family, single people as well. And so you just have to find the right fit for your family, and they are out there, and it's just becoming an increasingly popular option to donate embryos. I've just seen so much generosity, and just in the last couple of years as people learn that it is a really a great option for their embryos.
It really is. And for families who, let's say, have an excess number of or more embryos that they're going to actually use for themselves, going into an IVF cycle, it's often something that you are asked about as part of the consent forms, right? But in the US, right, unlike that Australian story, we don't force people to give away their embryos to other people without very rigorous consent, psychological evaluation, legal contract. All those things have to be in place before we even do it. And when a patient says to me something like, that's not going to be my baby, those aren't the people that are actually going to be recipients. The people that are recipients are patients that say to me, Amy, I'm really excited to receive this gift. I just want a baby, and this is so awesome that there's a family that's willing to donate to me, right?
That's absolutely true, and I feel like they feel often like it's a win-win. They get to give an embryo a chance, and they get to build their family, and then the donating family feels like, hey, we're giving our embryos a little send-off into the world and an opportunity. So it's just, right. I think it's just such a feel-good option.
It really is. Well, Dr. Allen, thank you for being on. We so appreciate you coming on. I know we have some future show topics that we'll be sharing with people soon on the emotional aspects of egg donation, the emotional aspects of sperm donation. So we'll certainly be talking to folks together in the very near future. Is there anything you want to send off or as a message to our audience tonight before we close?
No, other than just thank you for having me, and that I'm excited that people are considering this as an option. People are learning about it. Sometimes people come to me and they haven't even heard about it until they just recently found out, maybe through their doctor or through the internet, and they're just thrilled to find out that this is an option for them. So it's just a beautiful, I feel like, win-win for all parties involved.
Obviously, I couldn't agree more. Well, thank you for being on, and thank you guys for watching tonight. We look forward to seeing you next Wednesday night. See you soon.
Welcome to the Egg Whisperer Show, a program exclusively designed to promote reproductive health awareness and discuss fertility preservation options. Here is your host, the Harvard-educated fertility specialist, Dr. Amy.
She's known as the Egg Whisperer.
Fertility expert Dr. Amy Vazadeh.
And you have yet another success story.
Just launched by an East Bay fertility doctor.
Welcome to the Egg Whisperer Show, a program exclusively designed to promote